Well, Roger and
Yeah. Right.
I did that for about a year.
I like
I'm just gonna sit here.
Oh, you are?
Okay.
Okay, it's 1:50, so we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of everyone's time. We're here for the 150 session, which is going to be a presentation and kind of a panel discussion on appraisal expectations. I'm Mike McGregor with Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering, and I'll begin by kind of introducing the panel, and then I'll hand it off to them. So first we have Eric Monhollon. Eric began his career with the Division of Right-of-Way and Utilities in October of 1996 in the District 5 office in Louisville as an appraiser and acquisition agent. He became a review appraiser in the fall of 2003 and worked in that capacity until July of 2006, when he became the acting appraisal branch manager in central office. Eric was officially named the appraisal branch manager in February of 2007. He is a graduate of Bellarmine University with a BA in accounting. Eric and his wife Pam live with their daughter Tabitha in Louisville. Also, we have Joe Justice. Joe is a graduate of Pikeville College with a BBA in management. He began his career with the Division of Right-of-Way in 1997 in the District 3 office in Bowling Green as an appraiser. He transferred to the District 12 office in Pikeville in 1998. Joe became a review appraiser in 2003 and accepted his current position as a right-of-way program specialist 2 in 2013 with the primary responsibility of appraisal review in districts 10, 11, and 12. Joe lives in Pikeville with his wife Lisa and 2 children, Dalton and Bailey Joe. We also have Roger Crew. Roger Crew is a right-of-way program specialist 2 with the Division of Right-of-Way and Utilities Appraisal Branch. Roger is a 2005 graduate from Western Kentucky University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management. He began his career with the Transportation Cabinet in 2007 as a right-of-way agent 1 in District 4. Roger accepted his current position as a program specialist 2 in 2017 with the primary responsibility of appraisal review. He resides in Elizabethtown with his wife Josie and 2 children, Kendall and Carson. We also have Scott Clark as part of the panel, who also does appraisal review, but somehow his file didn't make it. So anyway, with that, I'll hand it off to Eric and let them start the discussion.
A few months ago, we got together, Dean and I and the rest of the appraisal staff and our assistant directors, and we were looking at these appraisals, and we were seeing that we just weren't getting all the information that we needed, especially in areas like the highest and best use discussion, or the discussions on sheet 10, or in photographs and sketches. So we set out to create a new set of expectations. To give you a little backstory on this, you know, as time went by and project parameters got shorter and everything, we got a little lax in requiring, you know, all of this information, and, you know, trying to get things done quicker. And it just became to the point where we weren't getting the whole story anymore, that we weren't really seeing what we needed, and Dean wasn't seeing what he needed to make the decisions he had to during the negotiations process. So we sat down as a group and discussed these areas and came up with a few expectations that we now give to the appraisers at every scoping meeting that we go to, and they do apply to our fee appraisers as well as our staff appraisers that are doing their work as well. So we're requiring it of everybody that's doing appraisal work for the cabinet at this point. Okay. Advancing. Okay. The first thing we're going to discuss is highest and best use, and due to some technical difficulties, we've got some examples of what we expect, and we're going to go through these slides first, and then we're going to show you the examples. So highest and best use, we want a detailed analysis of all factors that are considered. The application of the 4 criteria are very important during this discussion, and for properties with improvements, the analysis should be for both the property as though vacant and as improved. We were seeing sometimes before we put these out, you know, just one sentence justification of the highest and best use, and that just wasn't a proper analysis in this context. You guys have any best practices or anything that you'd like to add there as far as what you'd like to see as reviewers when we're talking about the highest and best use discussion?
Yeah, on the 4 criteria, it said we'd like to know how they meet each of the criteria. Just say, instead of saying it meets the 4 criteria, say how it's meeting those criteria.
Okay. That's good. Okay. We next go to photographs. You'd be surprised how many appraisals we got that had maybe 1 or 2 photographs in the report, and it just didn't tell the real story of what was going on. So for reports for partial acquisitions, excuse me, we need at least 10 photographs. And a lot of times that will include the area, the buildings and signs and all of that. So it's not hard to get to 10 photographs pretty quick. In some cases, like if we had a vacant property or something, it might not require 10 photographs. So our reviewers have quite a bit of discretion when it comes to how many photographs they can accept. And, you know, we want to make sure that when we're doing these, we want to see the proposed right-of-way areas. We want to see easement areas. We want to see permanent easement areas, good, clear pictures of signs, you know, both sides of the sign, not just one view of both sides of the signs. If they're electrified, we'd like to see the, you know, how that's set up in the photographs as well. SLI, remaining property, we'd like to see that as well. So if you've got a large property, you know, taking several pictures of the remainder is also required. Like I said, it should show all significant property features. They should also be numbered. They should be labeled and depicted with directional views of the acquisition, including all fee, permanent, and temporary easements. And the improvements acquired shall include photographs of front views, all side views, rear views, and any pertinent features. We also, if the improvements acquired, we want interior pictures of those as well. And that means all bedrooms, all bathrooms. If your report says it has 3 bedrooms, then we want pictures of all 3 bedrooms. You know, if it's got 2 bathrooms, we want 2 bathrooms, that sort of thing. So, and they, like I said, they should all be numbered, and if there are any billboards or anything, even though that's considered personal property in our process, we like to see pictures, you know, front and rear view, and utility connections on those as well. If there's any tenant-owned realty, we need pictures of that kind of thing. And all photographs should be best quality format that's possible. So make sure they're clear, they're concise, they're in the order, and we get a good view of everything there. Are there any questions about photographs? Do you guys have any comments about photos or anything like that at this point?
On the photos, I like to see photos on all buildings, whether it's required or not. Just there could be damages. We've all seen instances where there's been plan changes and we have to go back and maybe affirm the house and we'd have to go back and get photos again. I just think it's best practice, just go ahead on all buildings to do interior photos.
Property sketches. We were getting a lot of, Google Maps or Google Earth aerial photographs with the KMZ plan sheets, KMZ plan sheets that, overlaid on top of those. And a lot of times that just doesn't give us the clear view of the property as a whole and the improvements and everything that we need. So, a lot of times you had to zoom out so far to get all that on there. The property sketch became irrelevant. And in the old system, in the old RWUMS system, the pictures were so small anyway, that just made it worse. So hopefully we rectified that some with crowds so far. The entire property boundary should be shown. Sometimes I know that's difficult if it's a very large property, but we need to see the entire property bound, and any ground lease lines should be incorporated into the sketch as well. So if you can find that information and have good accurate information on that, that should also be complete. Should be included. Sketch will show the total area of the tract and area acquired, area severed left and right, proximity to the right of way and travel way to the principal buildings and grade along the frontage in both of the before and after situations. And once again, they should be clearly detailed in print quality format. So are there any questions or any comments that the reviewers have with that?
Well, as Eric mentioned, we've got some examples later on this, but what it comes down to is, as he mentioned, like with the Google Earth or Plan Sheet or KMZ, just inserting one of those is not sufficient, but it may take multiple sketches really to show what's going on there. It may be too busy on one plan sheet to try to show improvements and take areas and severances and photo locations. So what I'm seeing more often of is maybe a plan sheet that's been cropped, that's colored, that has text boxes, and then some kind of aerial imagery that may show photo locations and things like that. So crowds will take multiple sketches, and I found that to be kind of the best option that I like to use. But we don't have just one specific type of file, I guess it has to be used on this. And I think our examples will clarify that later.
Yeah, and one thing that you should make sure that you're using when you're doing this is putting north arrows on the maps. I know a lot of the aerial photographs that we do use, the Google Earth, or if you're working in Jefferson County, the Logic maps and things like that are orientated to where the north is to the top of the box, but we still would like to see the north arrow on there. And we'd also like, one of the things that we weren't getting that's important to us is the locations of the photographs. That's, there weren't any directional arrows on that, so you were kind of left guessing when you were looking at the sketch where the photographs were, which way the photographs were orientated and that sort of thing. So that's one thing that we're asking for. And I don't think we did do building sketches here. If the building's acquired or damaged, we'd like a detailed floor plan of that. So obviously if you can't get into the the building to do an interior inspection, then we won't be able to have that, but, and make sure if the property owner, for whatever reason, doesn't allow you into the property, that you denote that in your appraisal report. And so we'll know that you weren't able to do that part. We won't ask you to, the reviewers won't ask you to go back and add that information. Portions of the building that differ in construction class or design shall be delineated as well. That's a lot of times, if you're doing a cost approach, you'll have different classes, and we need to know where that is. Significant floor plan features, finished offices, that sort of thing, finished basements. Leased areas in multi-tenant buildings that should be clearly labeled. Does anybody have any questions about building sketches? A lot of times it seems like the building sketch is an afterthought when we're in our appraisal. So we're trying to make sure that we get all the information that we need there. Scott, do you have any comments on?
Like Joe brought up once before, you got a small parcel, even a building on it or just property, and you're showing your photos where they're taken from, you might want to put two sketches in, one showing the land where the photos are located, and one is showing the property sketch. Just so, because it can get cluttered up with all the arrows. So you want to be able to see the entire property, see the right of way. You probably want to put two of them in just to see it. It makes it clean. It just shows more information that way.
And we'll talk some about the narrative on sheet 10. A lot of times, if we had a parcel that was a total take on sheet 10, they just put total take, in all three boxes. So, once again, when you get to describe the take, describe the property on there, describe the property as a whole. Make sure you don't just put dwelling or something on there. Make sure that you label in your discussion, the 2,000 square foot, single family brick veneer residence or something like that. Be very descriptive when you're filling out the takes. Station numbers are appreciated as well when you're doing this kind of thing. Detail the direction of the acquisition, including land area acquired, type, class, and area, and denote any cuts and bills in detail of amount and effect on the subject property when you're describing the take. Yeah, we talked about this. Clearly denote linear amount of fencing. So don't just say there's taken fencing, say 1,000 linear feet of board fencing or chain link fencing or whatever it is. Make sure you describe that in the description of the take in item number 1 on sheet 10. List and describe all the sizes of buildings acquired, like we said before, and any other pertinent features. Describe the SLI that's in the take. Just don't. Just don't say you're acquiring an SLI. Make sure you tell us what that SLI is. Make sure you describe the proximity of the right of way to the buildings. Make sure you, instead of saying the building, the right of way line comes closer to the building, make sure you say it comes 30 feet closer to the building or whatever it is. Denote any and all utilities within the acquisition, and explain any leasehold interest. That one's a hard one to get out sometimes. But make sure all of that and including any billboard interests as well. So, does anybody have any questions about that, or do you guys have any comments as far as that goes. Okay,
We found the improvements to sheet 10 to be a big help on the acquisition side. If I can find the bulk of the necessary explanation there, it was done well. It's rewarding.
okay, well, good. I'm glad that they're finding that useful. It does get pretty difficult if you're trying to explain things to a property owner to have to go back and forth, or somebody in the decision-making areas to have to go back and forth through the report to find all the information they need. So having that all here in this one area is very helpful to the users of our appraisals. It's not moving again. And we talked about station numbers. If we've got a relocation, we need to have an analysis of if it's a typical home site, all the improvements related to the relocation, and include all tenant-owned property or leased property for relocation as well. And I would also add to that, if there are items that where there's a question is whether they're personal property or real estate, make sure you have a discussion of that as well. That way our relocation people don't, double pay the property owner if we're paying for it in the appraisal. Okay, so sheet 10, describe each remainder separately. List the classes and types of the remaining land. If there's a need for a neighborhood analysis, or we've got a change in highest and best use or something like that, then we need to discuss that kind of information in this area as well. Provide a highest and best use analysis if that's needed here. Consider whether the remainder will be considered in one economic unit or more. Give a detailed description of the remainder as if it were new or different than the one that existed in the before situation. And never reference the subject property in terms of its description before the acquisition. That came up from time to time as well. And it says the fee appraiser, but once again, I want to stress that this is all of our appraisers that are required to do this. Shall consider the property as it will exist after the proposed project has been completed. Once again, describe in detail the buildings that remain. If the residence remains, it's a 2,000 square foot brick veneer single family residence, that sort of thing. Make sure you list all the improvements in great detail and square footage or linear footage or whatever's called for in this case. Does anybody have any questions about that so far, or?
Did you list access?
I don't think we did, but yeah, if there's a change in access or something like that, we definitely want that to be discussed and how that will affect the internal flow of traffic in the property or things that'll have to, we don't say cost to cure, but cost to cure items that will have to be considered and things like that as well.
Even if there's no change, if access is still good,
Yeah,
you're changing from the number of access points and it got reduced, you still want to note that because that means to the property owner, you recognize that.
right.
You
Right.
still want it in there.
And also, Scott just alluded to it, but if there's no change in access, say there's no change in access. That'll make sure that we've addressed everything for the reader of the report. Discuss any factors under items 1 and 2 that result in a loss of value, proximity damage, changes in highest and best use, grade changes, loss of utility, anything like that. Make sure here that you clearly discuss those items, why that's happening, and make sure you do we didn't put it on the PowerPoint, but make sure the calculations of those damages are clearly put in this area as well. Accrue special benefits because of the acquisition, must clearly state how and why. Clearly justify your damages using estimates or damage studies or that sort of thing. Make sure the documentation and justification that satisfy current requirements. Use carefully developed properly applied studies under acceptable practices when referencing damages. I think a lot of times where we find trouble in this area is the properly applied studies. I've seen damage studies from Louisville that have been used in Harland County or something like that. It's make sure that these studies are properly developed and properly applied in the appraisal report. So before we get to any examples or anything, does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Okay.
Eric, I got a question.
Okay.
I mean, I was just speaking here to Greg, the right-of-way supervisor from Manchester. We were talking about the level of detail that is now being requested. It's always been required, but just reiterating the need about who the target audience of our appraisals are. And we're kind of the consensus that the audience or the person we're writing or the appraiser's writing is the agent who is going out, so that they understand that. And the reason I point this out, is there a code or an edict or a law that requires agents to provide, other than the policy that we have, a copy of the appraisal to the property owner at all?
As far as I know, there's no law or anything that requires us. That's just a policy that, oh gosh, it was 20 years ago or more when my predecessor, Woody Simmons and Ralph Devine, who was our director at the time, decided to do that. And I'm Kelly, you might know the reasoning behind that more than I would at this point.
Well, I mean, I just know that other states were doing that, and they were having success with it. It was just greater transparency, and it led to, like I said, greater transparency and maybe more faith with the property owners that the cabinet has nothing to hide in the report. And I don't know what else went into the decision making, but I know that they attended other ASHTO conventions and were seeing that it was being successful in other states, and so they decided to incorporate that here in Kentucky. But someone else may have some more insight. That's I just heard secondhand information on it in that regard.
Kelly, do you have issues like on sheet 16, when we give that to the property owners, they always come back and they start using it almost like it's not the price tagging situation. They start evaluating elements from that page, saying we didn't pay enough for the tree, or we didn't pay enough for this fence, and basically puts us agent in a bind trying to try to explain why
the appraiser identify these elements of the document. Allocation values.
Right, yeah, I mean, when I was an agent, yes, I mean, that was the issue that they would bring up, that, you know, they try to get into the weeds and identify what they're getting paid for each tree and things of that nature, and so it does become problematic, you know, and, you know, I would just, you know, assure them that, you know, it was taken care of. Now, sometimes errors occurred, and something was accidentally omitted. Of course, if that was the case, then we went back to the appraiser, talked it over with he or she or whoever it was that completed the report. But, you know, it does create some obstacles by us allocating items like that on sheet 16.
And I remember at that time, Kelly, too, we told, well, I say we, I was the low man on the totem pole at that point in time, but they toyed around with eliminating sheet 16 and the summary of the tape like that. I actually saw, you know, some of the workups of the new recap, and I don't think I did an appraisal with one, but, and I would also say that it's probably kind of dangerous to try to get into the mind of the appraiser and explain why he paid this for a tree to a property owner, but.
Well, that's one of the older agents in the group, I guess. Hey, look at me.
I wasn't looking at you, I was just trying to see if there's anyone here that had less hair than I did. But when, I can remember back when you were negotiating and you'd be going over the offer with them, and you would get in your appraisal in your folder and look at something and tell them the answer to a question they had. And they said, well, what are you looking at? Well, it's the appraisal. Can I see it? No, you can't let you see the appraisal. It's only for us. And that's one of the reasons that we turned it over and made it. So it didn't seem like such a guarded topic for them.
Vicky's not gonna have to go to the gym tonight. She's getting her exercise today.
Keep it right, I was just gonna add, but then what further complicated matters were, we would tell them to get an appraisal, and then we expected them to show us their report. And, you know, I think therein lies why we made the decision at the time that we would share reports, because it wasn't, I guess, truly fair to the property owner that we would not be transparent and share our report, but yet we expected that from them. And it just sort of led to, you know, somewhat contentious situation.
I'll add to that in that I had a scenario 22 years ago. My previous boss, we did not turn over the things at that time, the appraisals. And so we're sitting at the table and they wanted to show it to him. And he's got this death grip. And he's trying to hold it to him. And they grab it and they try to pull it from him, but he won't let go. And so literally, they're doing this at the table. And it got really awkward immediately. And I was initially not a fan of sharing the appraisals because that was what I learned and it was different. And in retrospect, I think that allowing the appraisals to be provided is probably one of the best, like, really procedural changes because it does do transparency. Talking about sheet 16 for me is, I know it's not supposed to be a summary of its parts, or let's say allocated values, whatever price tag. But I don't understand how you get a total without a summary of its parts. And I know that there are techniques that you guys and ladies use to, like when we do narrative appraisals, it doesn't really break it down like that. And that, from the acquisition side, I found it sometimes hard to really talk about like detailed things with a property owner because they want to know, well, how much is it per square foot? I mean, how much is it? It's not, I'm not talking about plans, I'm not talking about anything. My offer is based on a number, and how did you come up to that number? And they really do want to see that. And I get that sheet 16 can be a catch-22. But I would say on the whole, I think that it's really better to kind of have that because it is more transparent. And we didn't have that. Like when I talk to property owners, sheet 10, I point out all the stuff. But like sheet 10 is really where it's at. That's what Rick said in depth for the agent and the property owner. And then 16 is the summary, and that they should coincide. And as an agent, if you can't really give them the hard answers, which isn't too much to ask, how much is it per square foot? How much are you giving me per tree? I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road for them. And if we can't give them those answers, then it seems smoke and mirrors-ish, which completely impacts your integrity. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, whatever else is done. But that's been my personal struggle with that, for the appraisals, when I look at that.
Go ahead and get the examples up and we can go through those pretty quickly. Okay, they're up. Cool. I guess we'll just have to scroll down on these because it's a PDF document. As you can see, we've got a pretty good discussion of the highest and best use here. They define the highest and best use. They go through the, each of the 4 criteria there, and talk about the as improved value here at the bottom. So this is a good example of a, and it's not too too long-winded or anything like that, but it gives us a good idea of where this appraiser came up with the highest and best use of the property and how he or she came to that conclusion. So you can scroll on down to the next part where we talk about photographs. One of the things I want to show you here is all the photos. See how well this one's labeled. In the old days, you stamped on the back of it who did these, who did it and what direction it was in, and that includes all this. It's photo view 1. It's a view north of Canoe Creek on and such and such. And as long as you put in the first, all photos were taken by the appraiser or the appraiser's assistant or whatever. And on this date, you don't need to do it for every photograph. Just that one should suffice unless somebody else took the photograph. So. And you can see there's several different views here on this one. I'm going pretty fast now since Michael told me we had 5 minutes left. But so that, I must have had the wrong one here because I had some photographs of buildings too. Sorry about that, everybody, but in the new system, these are clearer, the pictures are bigger, they're more useful, they give more area on the side to write descriptions and everything. So make sure we take advantage of that. Here's a good example of a property sketch. It's an aerial. This is a vacant property once again, but it clearly shows the property, all of the property lines, and describes each of the TE is track B and how big it is. The blue is the right-of-way tract and its size. That's a pretty good example of the sketch. What we like to see here. I kind of wish I'd put one of Steve Rawlings in there, how he did it, but so
What's the area in yellow?
That is the property line.
No. The one that says track B.
oh, that's a TE area.
Oh,
Yeah.
And it's green. Yeah, it's green. We've got kind of standardized colors. Blue's the right-of-way
Right.
tape, green is the TE, and red is the PE, and we usually do the property lines in yellow. And there's the north arrow down there and everything. Like I said, this one's probably taken from Logic or one of those where everything's oriented to the north being at the top of the frame. Here we get a very similar sketch, and it lists the direction that all the photographs were taken. So kind of see that there. This is an example of how not to submit a property sketch.
Pretty good.
I mean, I see I see what's going on there.
It's got everything we were asking for, but we'd like to see a little neater, less, you know.
Did not have a ruler for that right hand.
Yeah, a ruler would have been nice. Yeah, this is the last part. Once again, this is a good example of a description of the take. It describes each take separately. It's got station numbers and everything. Let's see. So that one's pretty long. This is the second part where it's discussing the remainder, and it describes each remainder separately. We got a small discussion of the damages, and I think that's just because this is a permanent easement. And there's the clear calculations of that. So I believe that's it. So does anybody have any questions about these real quick? We're done. Vicky's telling me we're done, so we're done. No more questions. No more questions.
You can ask them at Holland.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Daniel, good job.
Question,